What is art?
Art is
history.
What is art? That's a good question.
This is Art Uncovered.
Art is our collective cultural history.
A weekly podcast that brings you interviews with an eclectic mix of artists and creators.
Art is
disappointing your parents.
I'm your host, Kimberly. Hello out there. Thanks for tuning in. My guest this week is William Chan, a New York-based artist and United States war veteran whose work includes performance interventions and photography. Throughout the conversation, we talk about William's ideologies surrounding communication, compassion, American politics, and laughter. Stay with us. William, welcome. It's so great to have you here. I'm super excited to talk with you this afternoon. Currently, you're in New York, right?
Yes, I am. I'm super excited too, Kimberly.
Yeah, we were chatting and laughing quite a bit before we started this recording, so hopefully some of that trickles into our actual recording. So I'm looking super forward to talking to you. And I think to start the conversation, I would like to talk about some of your recent work, which to me is a little bit hard to define because it's not really performance art. It's not really social engagement, but maybe it kind of is. So I'm wondering if maybe you can tell us a bit about what you're doing in recent years.
Well, I think I like to make art that I should say I don't want to waste my time. I guess I'm getting older in my life, and I feel sometimes in the beginning when I went to art school, and we were taught that art generally resides in a certain place, whether it is gallery, museums, and that's all great. Like, there's nothing wrong with that route. But in addition to that, I feel like when we have these really smart conversations that art can kind of elicit, we're not doing society justice by keeping it in a room. So this is something recent I thought about. Like, I love how comedians have been really political the last 4 or 5 years. Not that they've always been political, but they took it upon themselves to really take a side. And I think about like Dave Chappelle, like he's one of the most thoughtful, intelligent people, whether he's a comedian or not. But imagine his whole practice only lives within a comedy club or like a concert hall. And none of that ever gets recorded on Netflix or distributed through like YouTube, then like we would not have that smart conversation. Like Dave Chappelle paused a lot of these info, so I feel the same way about art. Like, you know, we have such tools to talk about and like break down information, and if we just keep it all inside a door that a lot of people don't go to, then I think we are not really doing what we're supposed to do as artists, which is both a student and a teacher. So that's why I like art that's more engaging outside of the art kind of circle. So
what would you say in response, not that I disagree with you at all, just to, deepen the conversation about, like, especially during COVID, right, when a lot of art exhibits went online and were, in theory anyway, distributed on the internet, which is obviously a democratic platform.
I think that's great. I think that's definitely another way of engaging. Like, it was forced on us to kind of reevaluate how to receive art. And then now that we are kind of coming out of it, hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers on this one. I think is a great opportunity to continue that conversation. Obviously, there are things that cannot fully be viewed online. There are things that are kind of like, a lot of art is kind of like ambience, like a feeling that cannot be done on like the internet. So how do we take that approach and continue with it, and how do we display art in a more accessible way? I think that's my answer.
Yeah, interesting. So let's talk a bit about some of the quote unquote work, not meaning objects, because like I said, your work is more about engagement. Can you tell us about some of these? I think you may have even called them interventions, an intervention performance.
Right. I didn't know that. I don't think about it. I don't try to go into anything with the mindset that it has to fit a certain description. I think art is just a way for me to kind of start the conversation. But is it art? Is it life? Now it's going to sound really pretentious. But so I think Laurie Waxman wrote a review, and she was writing for she's a critic and a professor based out of Chicago, and she was writing reviews for artists during COVID as a way to kind of keep the community going. And she said that what I was doing, she saw some of the performance I've done, and she called it a intervention performance or something like that. So that's how I got that name.
Okay.
Then I started researching, and I realized a lot of people were doing that, where like they were going to situations that they didn't plan, and they inserted themselves into like that public like sphere. So there is a history to it, which I thought was kind of cool.
So they're not planned. So you don't like, schedule a place and time to be somewhere and, prepare questions such as I did for this interview, for example.
It is prepared. The intention is there on my end. Okay. But none of it is like the other parties are not aware that this is happening. But nor do I force my agenda on other people. Like when I go there, my intention is to engage. But I'm not here to make anyone look good or look bad. It's just like I guess the integrity is their conversation. Like I'm simply responding to the circumstances. So in the case where when I went, I think it was right before COVID, the Democratic nominees were going around and doing rallies. And then in the case with Andrew Yang, I just went. That was in New Hampshire, so it was close enough. So yeah, I'm based out of Brooklyn, so I drove up to New Hampshire and just to listen to like all the different candidates. It so happened that they do live streams of it, and a lot of people recorded it. So the documentation became like an art thing. But I don't go in expecting people to record it. I don't record it myself. But with Andrew Yang, he was talking about peace in the Middle East, and that moment was right after the U.S. I think launch of some rockets into Iran because they attacked Iraq. Iran supposedly attacked Iraq, and then we, in response, launched missile into Iran. I believe something like that.
Yeah, that was within the last 3 years, right?
Yeah, I think so many things has happened in the last year. Like I totally forgot. That was it's all
oh my gosh,
back.
Yeah, that was just last year. That was 2020.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then Australia had this crazy wildfire in Australia. So like every month has just been like
that's right.
The magnitude of craziness that's been happening the last year and a half. So now it's all coming back to me now. Yeah. So this is before COVID, and I feel like we need, because of the election, and it was such an important election that I want to be engaged in our democracy. And I think, whether it's art form or not, we need more conversations within the party, outside of whatever. I'm an independent. I think I'm progressive, but I don't believe in parties. I believe in ideas, and sometimes I agree with someone or not. But it's important that we have these conversations. That even within, let's just say, the Andrew Yang rally, that I could talk about things that are more conservative. Like I think that's important. So
yeah. So if we can just, I just want to clarify for listeners here. So basically, what this intervention looked like was you went to a rally for a political candidate in, was it New Hampshire? You said.
Yes. In
New Hampshire. And then what happened at this rally? So you intervened in some way, and what did that look like?
Well, it was two. So usually, I think they spoke for like maybe an hour, and then in the end, they usually do Q&As. And then, so I'm not forcing myself on them. I'm not like shouting at them. Okay. So in the Q&A, I wait my turn, and I spoke, and then but I wasn't really speaking to the candidates, but I was speaking to the audience.
I'm a little bit nervous, but you could bear with me. It's a bit of a question, but it's really a statement. I've been following a few candidates, Senator Warren, Senator Sanders, and Mr. Yang, all really good people. I think we some of the best group of people that we have seen in a while. And but in the last week or two, I think I'm not from New Hampshire, so just to be transparent, I'm from Brooklyn, and I drove from Brooklyn this morning with my
There you go.
because the last 2 weeks with the escalating tensions in the Middle East, two people on TV have talked about de-escalating, and they were very firm about it. One of them was Mr. Yang, and the other one was Senator Sanders. Am I correct? Is that? Yeah, and I apologize. I don't know everything, and I'm just one person. But I'm also here, as much as I'm here to see Mr. Yang, I'm also here to be with my fellow American. I am a combat veteran from Iraq.
Yeah.
I love my country. I think I went into the service because I'm an immigrant, and I felt like I always have to prove myself. And I had some warped idea of what being American is, but I'm 44 now. I'm a parent. My son reluctantly is sitting next to me. And I think I've grown to understand that there's a lot of people who are as patriotic as me. Like James Bowen is probably just as patriotic as any service person. And everyone here, whether you're a teacher, a doctor, anyone could represent the right values. So in 2016, when they said, make America great, okay, I thought they're talking about the same great that I'm thinking, meaning strong, with a lot of humanity, with a lot of humbleness. That's what I thought great was. Right. I didn't know this is what they meant by great.
Yeah, so as we just heard from the clip, so the clip is kind of short, and so basically a part of my approach is also, it's not to serve me only, so I don't want to interrupt. So I look for an entry point to the conversation that is ethical, I guess. Like I'm not here to kind of serve myself or like put myself on the soapbox. So a lot of times, whether it is Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, they're very engaging. They're very open to Q&As in the end. So in the case of Andrew Yang, because I think he was running behind a little bit versus the top tier candidates, so I was able to speak a long time. And I think just speaking to the audience and letting them know, I think in this case that most of the people who were behind Andrew Yang usually are not veterans. And then at the same time, the Republican side, they really push their nationalistic kind of patriotic kind of brand. Mm-hmm. And so in this clip that you just heard, I think there's a new way of looking at, not a new way, but that we need to talk about patriotism as coming from the heart and not necessarily like having a tattoo with a flag or like driving or like having 8 flags like outside your house. And because then it's kind of like disingenuous. Like I think that's great too. Like if you want to have a tattoo of the eagle on your chest, nothing wrong with that. Like there's nothing wrong with being patriotic, but that does not having that does not mean that you're not patriotic. Like you could love your country and be critical, and then we kind of have lost that. Like if you're critical of your country, like somehow a section of the U.S. says that you're not patriotic, that you're being disrespectful to our troops. Mm. So as a veteran, I'm telling you that I'm not disrespected. In fact, like as a father, I'm critical of my son out of love. Like if I didn't care about my son or my country, I wouldn't even like worry about it. I wouldn't even like talk about it. So for someone like James Bowen or any of the artists or people, that's coming out of love. Like you really care about your community. That's why you're critical. So I hate that the Democrats sometimes don't kind of talk about that more. I think Pete Buttigieg spoke about that because he is a veteran. He is, he has done everything that supposedly the patriots should do. And like he kind of speaks about how Democrats are just as patriotic as anybody else. So I think that was the reason I spoke. to kind of, and also talk about peace too in that clip.
This is Art Uncovered. We'll be right back. Thanks again for tuning in, all. As you may have noticed, this podcast may sound a little different than it did about a month ago. And that is because I moved this podcast into my own name so that I can grow it in a way that benefits my guests, the conversations, and the listeners. So a lot is going to stay the same. This will still be a weekly interview-based podcast highlighting the work and practice of emerging artists, but some things have changed with this move. The big difference is how our episodes will be presented. So our podcast now has its own URL, artuncoveredpodcast.com. There I'm able to organize, group, and archive conversations based on theme. So basically I'm going to be creating playlists based on a theme so that you can listen to a stream of conversations all related to a certain idea. Those ideas will range from specified media to a common conceptual idea such as climate change, race and identity, family, etc. So you'll also notice on our website in the upper right-hand corner a donate button. Since I'm running this podcast now on my own without the backing of a company, any donation will be graciously accepted. It will help ensure the continuation of this podcast, and it will also help fund special conversation episodes that will take the form of recorded panel discussions and live events. All that information and more is available on our website and also on our Instagram page at art_uncovered_podcast. Thanks for listening, thanks for following, and now back to the episode. This is Art Uncovered. Before the break, I played a clip from one of William Chan's performance interventions in which he spoke to the audience at an Andrew Yang rally in New Hampshire. It seems like the other audience members were very supportive of you speaking. I'm wondering if you have ever encountered hostility when you, in any of your interventions.
I have. I've done this for a while. Yes, definitely. But I think they've all been very pleasant. They're not in the sense that no one tried to beat me up from these interventions. But yeah, I'm also not I'm not like a small guy either. I'm not. I think that helps too.
Are you
I'm
scary
not like a
looking?
tiny person. No, I'm not scary looking.
Can't tell through radio.
I'm probably like 5'10", like 190. But I was also a former drill sergeant too, so I know how to claim like a space. Like I know how to use presence, even if whatever my physical stature is. I know how to like claim a room if I want to. So, I've had speaking experience for like a really long time, so I'm comfortable with any situation at this point, like just speaking. There hasn't. You could tell when people are not with you, but I think that's also part of it. My approach has always been respectful. I think it's important. I think conversations are really important, and it's important to have different views. Like I don't want one party in a democracy. We need multiple parties, and then respectful conversations. So I think they're more like when we think about what we want in our lives or in our society, they are moral questions, which is harder to find a common ground because they're not necessarily logical. Your moral standards might come from religious, might come from cultural, and it's hard to be absolute with that. Mm-hmm. But then whatever your morals are, that's your kind of like foundation. And then once you're done with that, then the legislative end comes. Then we have to figure out if you believe in the minimum wage, then that's a moral question. Do you believe that everyone should have a certain minimum wage? If you believe in that as a moral standard, then the next thing is to say, is it $10? Is it $11? And to me, that's more like a business decision that we could kind of have passionate conversations about. But to me, then it's no longer moral. Like it's no longer, at least it's not like life and death. Like it's just a matter of like balancing out the accounting books. So we need to respect those two sides. but you cannot have a functioning law that it's not based on morals. So the biggest question is, how do we collectively agree on a certain set of morals that obviously not everyone's going to have the same. So how do we kind of have that conversation first? Because none of the laws will work if you don't agree on what is the basis, what is fair, like gender equality. Do you believe in gender equality? Do you believe in minimum wage and healthcare? You know, like as a moral question. So I think that's why I want to have these conversations. If we talk about policies and we don't talk about the morals behind it and why you agree or not agree, then I think it's a waste of time. So where there's the border issues and so on.
And do you think that, so you're kind of tackling that question through the art world, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So do you think that the art world is a more effective place to be having these conversations?
I think the tools that we have as artists, whether this interview or what I'm doing and many other people are doing, I use the skills as an artist, but it's not, the audience is not meant to be insulated within the art world. Like, I'm not interested in talking to people within like MoMA or like Whitney necessarily. It's meant to be for everybody, and I think I do think our country is kind of stupid. I never realized this, and I was like, really? Like, just the last 5 years, it's just been like, really? Like, but it's also emotional. It's not so much an academic. We tend to think that intelligence equates to like certain, like whatever degrees that you have attained through education, and that's important. Like book smart is important, but also emotional intelligence has to be focused on too. Like, and we kind of, for a country with as much resources as we have, we don't focus as much or equally. We don't balance the science with emotion, let's say. Like, it's important to know math, and like you need those tools to like parse information or to make planning. But we're also human beings. We are both emotion and logic, and we mainly function out of emotions more than logic. So we have to balance that education. And because of that imbalance, most older people I find cannot adapt to Facebook. They don't know when Facebook is giving you false information because they don't come from that world. So if you're like 65, and a lot of my friends are older that served with me in the Army, and they are actually like the people who are putting out a lot of these false information. I'm like, just like, they are the QAnon whatever people. And I'm like, we can't have a conversation about policy if you are so far on the other end. If you're, you know, like, I don't know if it's a
And
UFO.
what do you think?
I don't know a lot. Like,
what do you think is the cause for that? So their older generation that doesn't have the, what is it, like the emotional education?
It's both. I think, but it's not so much emotional. It's both. We are becoming more and more of a visual society. So there's a lack of visual literacy for those who don't have that kind of, like, if they never grew up on TikTok, Snapchat, they don't know how much information is being done on a 2-minute viral clip, how people edit things, how even color and sound, like, or even angle, or even photography isn't true. You know, like, even if a photojournalist there's so many ways to tweak a perspective, kind of like data. Like, you know, you could put a stat. There's enough stats to like basically support almost any argument, but you have to look deeper and find out like these like statistics, how they calculate it. And the same thing with photographs now. Like, because we're kind of lazy, we all speak. How many people read a full article now? Like, I grew up, they were like, I was forced to buy a New York Times going to school. Like, you had to buy the New York Times. Like, we have to read it for homework in 5th grade. But nowadays, everything gets truncated to a Twitter headline. Like, we don't really invest in like the nuance of information. And then for those who didn't grow up on memes, they don't really know when a meme is satire or funny. They have no idea. So and then so the emotional end is now they are like, for a lot of us, the emotional education has not advanced with the other like traditional education. So you need that balance. Like that's why we have a mental health issue. We like to just dump everything into mental health because it's like an easy answer. But what does that mean? What is the mental health, and what is the answer? And I think that's important to balance like intelligence and emotion, and that would be a more healthier society.
So I'm curious, William, because you have so much experience in, public speaking, and you're a war vet. I'm curious how and maybe why you chose art. And actually, what? Let me correct myself there. And ask you, were you doing art before you went to war?
No, I did not.
Okay, so what was your inspiration to choosing art?
While I was in Iraq, this is back in 2002. I was in Iraq and I was really interested in photography. So I was reading a lot of photo magazines, and I even had people send me photo magazines. So I was really interested in photo magazines. And then after I came back from Iraq, the government, because of the GI Bill, I had 4 years of tuition that I could use. So I was like, oh, great. Like, and it's also free. It's free school, and they have a stipend based on your zip code. So living in New York City, I had like a really high cost of living stipend. So it was really lucrative to just go to school. So I went to FIT, which is the Fashion Institute of Technology, for a 2-year degree in photography. But in the middle of it, I was exposed to like more art theory and art, like not just more like photography, but like I was exposed to like different art practices through like art history classes, and I was like really drawn into it. So I spent the last 2 years of my GI Bill, and I got my master's in MFA photo video at School of Visual Arts. And then I was exposed to so many different writers and philosophers, and I think that's why I feel like traditional education are not well-rounded. Now that I have a comparison, my first bachelor's at Buffalo was actually in finance. And at the time, I didn't even know the art scene. Apparently, like a lot of great artists kind of like lived in Buffalo. Like that was a big art scene for a while. And I did not know that. Like,
Me neither.
yeah, Sidney Sherman. There's a thing there.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm like, I spent 4 years there. I don't think I ever knew they had a gallery. Like now, there's like all these great museums in Buffalo that I go to now. So it's funny that we could be so insulated within a bubble, even within New York State or the country. So how do we connect these individual bubbles? And now it's even harder because everyone has their own micro bubble with the iPhone, with the phones in general. Like they could insulate themselves into their own tiny bubble and curate their experience, like through Instagram, through like other means. So how do we bring them out of it as well? Like I'm not here to stop people from using a phone because I use it a lot too. But how do we point out that there's also a reality that you have to vote, you still have to re-up on policies.
Have you ever thought of going into politics after coming back from war? And I do want to clarify, because I don't want to make it sound like I wish you went into politics, even though I do think we need more politicians with your mind frame. But I guess I'm wondering, like, which world is either more powerful for spreading what you want to spread, or do you feel like you just belong in one world versus another?
I think there's a lot of people doing similar things, including yourself, and everyone has to we are literally just one dot out of 7 billion happening right now. There are 7 billion people on Earth right now starring in their own movies. And we are all just Like I'm an extra in your movie. I'm just a 20-minute part of your life. But in your movie, you're the main character. And I think so I want to respect that there's 7 billion hearts and minds happening right this minute. And there are a lot of people doing what we are doing. And so I feel like for me, I'm just doing it organically. Like I let my conscience and my gut kind of like lead the way. And I think I hope it's Maya Angelou that said this. I might have been wrong, but yeah, when you know better, you do better. And I think all of us, as long as we continue to strive to learn and be better, the rest will be better. So So when I think about politicians, I'm not opposed to it. Running for government. I actually, in my head, I am planning to go to school again, for a government degree, like the Harvard JFK school. But
cool.
Once I'm done raising my son, I have to raise my son first. But yes, that has been in my mind. But I also like to live my life like an artist. So I'm very open about drug use and things like that. So, but it's like, I want a candidate that's just honest. Like, I don't want a perfect person. I feel like there's a bit of dishonesty when you put yourself out there as this perfect person. Like, then no one is perfect. Like, how
100%.
do you, it's like, if your life is based on a lie, even if it's just 90% truth and 10% lie, then you end up like having to spend energy to cover that lie, and then it just makes everything like dishonest. So I would love to run for office, but only if if I could be totally honest with myself and other people. So I'm not sure the world is ready. I'm not sure the world is ready.
Well, William, thank you so much for speaking with us today. It was an honor to speak with you, and it now is an honor just to know you. And I look forward to seeing what you do in the future, whether or not that means going into politics. If listeners also want to follow you, I assume your Instagram is a good place, maybe your website.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Keep this in. Yes, please keep all this. I just keep the laughter. I think I love laughing, like, because the world, like, we all know the world can be difficult, and we all have a lot of things happening in our lives that we don't necessarily have to bring to the surface in every conversation. But like, I'm quite aware the world, just growing up, and existential questions are tough. So if we could just laugh, or if we could have moments of laughter throughout the day randomly, I feel that's a great way to live. Like, just, it's almost like a break in life. And then I know you have to go back to like editing or like family or whatever it is that you do in your life. So like, if we could have half an hour of random like laughter, I think that's really healthy for everyone. Something to look forward to.
You're wonderful, William. Thank you again so much.
I am.
All right, listeners, that's all for this week. Be sure to tune in next week as I will be speaking with Carmel Sabri, a socially engaged Palestinian artist whose work begs us to look at Palestine with an alternative lens, a lens that celebrates culture and fosters meaningful discussion. I hope to see you all then. Have a safe week. Bye-bye.